All right, the next question is from Lucky, and the question is about non-physical matter realities. Do these realities exist, or are they just created in real time for having those experiences? And after the experience is over, it's removed from the system to save resources?
Yeah.
The analogy that he gives would be, he gives an analogy, it'd be like opening an application on a computer, it loads the memory and takes up resources, and then we close it, we release all the resources?
Yeah, okay. Mostly that's the way all the realities work. All the virtual realities work that way. And I would refer him to the game No Man's Sky. And he'll find that works exactly the same way. When you visit one of their planets in that game, you make that planet up on the fly, and as soon as you look the other way, it disappears. It doesn't stay there. That's the efficient way to make a virtual reality. All realities are virtual. The only thing real is consciousness itself. So all the realities are virtual, and they all are just data streams. That reality does not exist out there even by itself. You see, any more than the world of Warcraft exists out there by itself. The world of Warcraft only exists in the minds of the players. It's a data stream to the players. The players look at the data, and they, in their mind, interpret the reality. That's the way it is in an out-of-body state or any other state. It's a data stream to you. You get that data, and you interpret it to be that reality. When you no longer are getting that data stream because now you're doing something else, now you woke up and going to go take a shower or something, then that data stream's gone. That's no longer computed. If you go back to that reality, then it recomputes. Now the question may be, well, if you visit a particular non-physical reality and then you leave it, if somebody else comes to that same place and looks at it, will they see the same thing? And the answer is, there is no place. Only in a buttoned-down physical, quote-unquote, reality like our virtual reality, one that has a very tight rule set, wherein the rule set is so expansive that it appears to be physical. That is, you have a rule set that defines physical causality, and it's the detailed rule set. That's what a world being physical means. It just has a rule set that's detailed enough that causality is defined in detail. Any virtual reality has a rule set, even if it's like the dream reality that doesn't have a very detailed rule set. All kinds of strange things can happen in dreams. In dreams, you do teleport and fly and do all sorts of things you can't do here because the rule set there allows that. Here it does not. So it's a much less tight rule set in the dream world. Anyway, all these realities work the same way. They send you a data stream. You interpret that data as that reality. It's not a place. It's a data stream. And when you're no longer getting that data stream, no longer being computed. If somebody else is getting that same data stream or a very similar data stream, then they would see a very similar thing. Okay, now in this button-down reality, virtual reality of ours, it's a multiplayer game, and we all share data streams that have to be consistent with each other. That's what it means to be a multiplayer game. We all see the same environment. We all see the same trees, the same rocks. We all play on the same map. Well, in an out-of-body reality, there is no map, okay, that we all share. Everything is individual. Now, there are many things will be similar, but it's not a map of places. It's not that button-down a reality. It's a much looser reality, just like the dream reality. When the reality is very loose, then everybody doesn't see the same thing, even at the same place. A loose reality doesn't define the causality that precisely. See? So that's, so the idea that it is an individual reality from an individual data stream, and yes, others can have a similar experience, but it doesn't mean they've been in the same place. There is no place. It's a data stream. They've gotten a similar data stream. Why did they get a similar data stream? Well, maybe because they intended to have that experience or go to have the same experience you did, like Bob Monroe and his park that he goes to. Well, a lot of people have been in Bob's park, but that's because they intended to have that experience. They got that data stream, they had that experience. Okay? That doesn't mean that somewhere out in non-physical land there's a park. There is no park, either here or there or anyplace else. It's all information in a data stream.
Okay, Tom. I know when we talk about physical and non-physical, it is somewhat a perspective, and yet the rule sets, as you say, differentiate between them. They're distinguished somewhat between by the different rule sets. But when you focus on an NPMR reality, say you visited dozens of non-physical matter realities, you have an address of that. And of course, it is still your interpretation of that. If you have this address, you can go back to that. But what you are seeing, and if what someone else wants, well, I want to go to that reality where Tom visited, where he spoke with this kind of non-physical being. It was a certain distinctive non-physical being. You could tap into that way, and yet still it is still distinctively subjective.
Yeah, it's not a place. So if I go back to someplace I've been, and I'd say I was someplace where I met other beings and made friends and, some other reality frame someplace, and I want to go back there, what I'm really doing is not going back there. There is no there. That's just the language we use to describe it. We use that language because we live here in this physical virtual reality, so that makes sense to people to say that. What I'm doing is connecting to the data stream. I'm connecting to the data stream that sources, if you will, that reality frame. It's like I want to go back to The Sims. All right, how do I do that? Well, I go log into The Sims and start getting that data stream. That's how I do it. Now I want to go to World of Warcraft. Well, I go to log into World of Warcraft. I start getting that data stream. So it's not that the World of Warcraft and Sims are places that you go to visit. They're just data streams being served out by a server someplace. And you can insinuate yourself into that data stream so that you're getting that data. And when you do, then you're a part of that reality, you see? And you can exist there as just getting that data, and you're an observer. Like you don't have a body there. You're just kind of observing, like a disembodied spirit observing, from above kind of thing. And you can maybe hear their voices and see the action, but you're not actually there. Or you can get into it to where you're part of the multiplayer game, which means then they get a data stream that has you in it. Not only you getting a data stream that has them in it. Now you're multiplayer in that game. That's what's called having a body. You're not really making a body. You're just getting into a data stream. And that data stream can be a multiplayer or a single player game, an observer, if you will, or an actor. So these aren't places, they're just data streams. And if it's something that you individually just do, you're out of body and you go someplace and you see something, it's not part of a multiplayer game. It's just your game. It's a single player game. All right. Well, in that case, it's probably a single data stream. Just for you. The system is giving you because you're off on an adventure and it's giving you something that might help you grow up, or you're just having fun, being amused, by what you can see, whatever. That's your own data streams, your own personal experience. If you get into a multiplayer game, now it's a little different. If it's multiplayer, now other people are also involving and in getting a similar data stream. Now it's interactive. Our dreams can be interactive. When we have dreams, we interact with other people. Sometimes two people can have a dream and interact with each other within that dream, and they both remember it and both can discuss it. It's not impossible. Well, they're having a shared multiplayer game, if you will, in that dream, which is another virtual reality, or it may be a single player game. We're not talking about space, we're talking about data streams. The system generates the data streams for us individually or for us in an interactive sense if the interaction is part of what we're doing. In an out of body, most of the time, it's not interactive. It's a single player game. You're getting a single data stream. And when you wake up, go take a shower, the computer isn't computing that data stream anymore. There's no point. There's no user. There's no consciousness. There's no player. Why would it generate data if there's no player? You see? So you can get back in your mind and say, oh, remember that place I went 3 nights ago doing that? I want to go back there. Well, you can start right back there. The system will give you a continuation of that data stream because that's what you ask for. System generally gives you what you ask for. If you don't ask for anything, it's just wild card, like hitting the "I feeling lucky" button on the Google search. You can do that and you'll just get whatever. So if you don't know enough to precisely tell the system what you want to do, then you'll just get whatever comes out. It's the "I'm feeling lucky" button and you'll get whatever you get. It doesn't mean that what you got is existing out there as a place even after you're gone. There are no places. There are no places anywhere. Place is a thing that we imagine when we interpret the data. There is no World of Warcraft place. There is no Sims place. They're all just data streams. And they only send out data streams to players. If there are no players, there are no data streams going out. Nothing's being computed. It's just sitting there in the server, dormant. A player logs on, there's one data stream going to that player, and that's all that's going on. 100 users log on, every one of those 100 users or 100 players, they get a data stream. And if they happen to run across each other on the map, well, they're interactive. Now they can get together and do things. You see? Or if it's a single player game, they'll never run into somebody else at which they're interactive. Or if they do, they'll all be computer generated characters, not necessarily other IUOCs playing a game. I know it's confusing.
Thank you,
John. It's a real hard thing to get your head around, but it's, that's the way it is. I can't say it anyway.
I think that helped.
It's any simpler.
No, I think that helped very much. Using the next question from Dave Mars, using the World of Warcraft metaphor, since we're talking about these kinds of things, does MBT prohibit the following scenario from happening? IUOC 1 player 1 is sitting in front of a computer playing World of Warcraft using the free will awareness unit or avatar 1. In the middle of the game, he stands up and IUOC player 2 sits down in his place and takes over the game, continuing to use the free will awareness unit avatar 1. I would just say that I have some pretty specific, detailed personal experience that leads me to ask that question.
Okay, if the question is, can that happen? That means, can one player be replaced by another player in the middle of the game? So here we got a game going, we got an avatar. That avatar's name's Joe Jones, and he's doing whatever Joe Jones does in this virtual reality, and they switch players so that there's some other free will awareness unit playing that character. Yes, that can happen. That's obviously possible because digital systems are very flexible, but it also does happen occasionally. It's not that common because the whole idea is that learning is cumulative. If you got a character going, you want to keep that character going and play the character because you'll learn more that way. If every time you log on, you get a different character, it's really hard to accumulate any knowledge of how to best play that character. So people don't do that, just randomly jump around and change players because it's counterproductive. But it does happen occasionally in the margins for special reasons and special purposes. So it's a very minor event that's not very probable in the sense that, or it's not very probable if you just look at it's a very small fraction of the people that ever experience that. But yes, it does happen.
Yes, we know of an instance like that. Also, let's extend that question a little bit further. Can player 1 and player 2 play the same avatar?
Can there be more than one player playing an avatar? Yeah,
right.
that's another way of saying that. So can two players play one avatar?
Right.
They would both have to be logged on to the player. And again, if you think of an information system, that is possible. Almost anything's possible in a digital information system. That's possible. But they would, if they were going to be effective, they'd need to cooperate. Okay. Now, if they didn't care about being effective and they were going to struggle for dominance of the player, then I suspect the player and the game and both the players and the avatar, wouldn't be very effective in helping anybody lower their entropy. That would sound like a not very profitable game to be in. But yes, it's possible. And even more rarely than the last one I talked about, it does happen occasionally.
All right, Tom. Question from JR53. I have a question about the evolution of an information system. As you say, consciousness is trying to evolve by becoming more information, which I understand. But from what I understand about information, new information has to be something different from what we had before to be of any value. So how are we evolving consciousness whilst we're still learning here, when we are just learning and creating the same information that's been created before? Or is my interpretation incorrect?
Well, it depends on how you define new information. Everybody here is unique. Everybody's experience is unique. Every avatar is unique. Every consciousness is unique. So it would really be hard to keep doing the same thing, just to be duplicating what's been done before. Everything is unique. So everything is new and unique to each consciousness avatar combination is a unique combination that has unique experience and unique opportunities to grow. So nothing is really the same. And it's not so much that the lower entropy, that things have to just be different. Different isn't or new and different isn't really the main criteria. It's, do you make something that's more meaningful, more significant, that's better in some way, more structure, more content, okay, as opposed to less content, less structure. You're taking those bits and doing something that has more value. Well, that would be unique. If you've got a certain number of bits and you've got them configured in this way, and you find a way to configure them in a way that's more constructive, more useful, which means lower entropy consciousness, of course, in this metaphor that we're using, then you have done something different and new, yes, but it's not that it's different and new isn't the most important thing about it. The important thing about it is that it's lowered entropy. It's helpful. It's useful. It's moving in a helpful direction. So it's not just the difference in the newness. That's the key thing. Key thing is value. Is it valuable to the system? Does it offer new value to the system? And everything is unique, pretty much. So there's bound to be similarities, but there's never repetition.
All right, and along the same lines, are we here to learn how to become love so that when we are love and are able to freely share information without fear, we can combine with a whole group of other consciousnesses to all share information and then create some new information that has not been created before because we have more power in higher numbers?
Well, we're able to do that anytime, all the time. I mean, we always can gather together with other individuated units of consciousness and share information. That's nothing that only can happen when you become love. That's something that can happen even on the negative side. So you always got that open to you in any case. Now, does that happen a lot? Is that a thing that when you get evolved up to a certain point, you join the club of the, I don't know, what is it, the Enlightenment Club, and in the Enlightenment Club, you all hang out together and come up with even more amazing ideas. Not really. That isn't my experience that it really works that way. You probably always, no matter what level you are, kind of share things with other units of consciousness. That's kind of how you test out your ideas. It's how it's part of your growth is interaction with others. You don't interact, you can't just grow up in a vacuum by yourself. That doesn't work very well. Your growth comes through interaction. So yes, we'll always interact with others, but will we form kind of a team to solve problems? Not really, because that's only good if the problems you're solving are intellectual problems. When the problems you're solving are problems of being, then getting a bunch of people together really just isn't that helpful. It's not that useful. Get a bunch of people together tends to create opportunities for ego choices and belief choices more than anything else. So no, there isn't that kind of, grouping up at the upper echelons of evolution to come up with better and better ideas, because all of that is intellectual and it doesn't matter anyway. And all that intellect working together is just begging for ego to start to grow there. So it's more of an individual thing.
Okay, it does remind me somewhat of what you said once in one of our interviews about evolving as units, and it involved the how would we reach another universe? Well, if we evolved this reality enough, we would then have more opportunities, and those rule sets would fall away, and we would be able to evolve as a unit. The whole, say, for instance, the whole planet, and then into the whole universe. So that sort of reminded me of that.
Okay, you're thinking of something a little different, and maybe they're thinking of something a little different too. That is that in our evolution as a species, now that we're talking at the species level, not the individual level, but as a species, we need to learn to come together, cooperate, and care about each other. If we do that, then we will create another thing. We will create something that's bigger than all of us. That will be a new thing, if you will. It'll be it'll be the summation of all of us. So we'll create this collective consciousness. That'll be a very wonderful thing to behold, because it'll be a highly cooperative union of a lot of individuated units of consciousness. But you still have all the individual, consciousnesses are still there. They're still individual, and they're still growing and learning in their own way. It's just that together they form something, they form a culture. They form something that is bigger than themselves. A culture is bigger than just the people that are in it. It's a you could call it group mind, or shared consciousness, if you will, shared information. And that happens just because we're all netted. All consciousness is netted with each other. So a group that's being very cooperative with each other and caring of each other can produce an environment for themselves to live in that is a very wonderful, supportive, creative environment. See, but now what we're changing is the environment, and that environment is a thing that's bigger and greater than all the pieces that are in it. Okay, but they're creating this environment of love and caring. So yes, that can happen. You can create an environment with a lot of people, but it's still an environment of a bunch of individuals, much as your body is. Your body is a cooperative environment of so many trillion cells. All these cells are individual. They come and go. They're created and they die all individually. They do their things. They have certain functions that they perform. Most of it is just algorithmic. Most of it isn't conscious. They're not at the same level that people would be on, but they all cooperate together and share, and they produce this environment in which they can all live and function nicely together. And together, what they create is us. Okay, they create a thing that's bigger than any of them, a cooperative whole. Well, we as humanity will do that one day. We will create an environment here on this planet, and then maybe others, that is very cooperative and loving and caring and supportive of each other. That's our destiny, to learn how to do that, where we will eventually go when we lower our entropy enough. And when we do that, we'll have this really nice environment. But all individuals will still be individuals, still growing up, still making choices, and being part of the whole. And there will be challenges there to maintain that environment. And there will be exceptions to it. There will be those who still are on evolving down the negative side. But yes, you can have collective consciousness as something bigger than the people that are in it, but that's now in the species environment. That's in a bigger environment. You always have the individuals that are making it up are still there in existence. It's not like they meld into just one big group mind and all the individual pieces melt together into something that is a different animal. Doesn't work like that. We're all going to be individuated units of consciousness, even if we join into groups that produce magnificent environments for us to exist in. There will still be challenges.
I think that's where some of the fear comes in. The whole is, you're speaking of the whole can be greater than the sum of its parts, and you're speaking about a greater cooperative unit. The fear that the individual will be lost is something that people might dwell on and might be afraid of because they have such an identity, but they don't realize that they have more possibilities open to them, that they become more free and have more choices.
When you're in a collective like that with people supporting each other, sometimes just this word collective frightens people, right? Because we live in that part of the world where the word collective is a bad word when it comes to social arrangements. But in that fear is based on a collective of people with high entropy. In a collective of people with high entropy, some people will take advantage of others, and you may become a cog in a big machine, and you will be less free, and you will be assigned something you don't want to do, et cetera, et cetera. We have lots of experience with that. But that's just because we have a collective of people with high entropy. If you have a bunch of fearful people together, they will make a collective environment that is fear-based, that is abusive, that is all self-centered about whoever's in power and whoever isn't, et cetera. If you have a collective of low entropy beings, people who love and care and are cooperative with each other, now you will have more individual freedom, more opportunities. You can do and be more things than you could ever do and be as just individuals who were not making this cooperative, supportive environment. It works just the opposite. So the idea that's very scary about, join a collective and somebody will give you a crank and tell you it's your job to turn it and you'll be stuck because that's what the collective needs is a crank turner and you happen to be available and now that's your assignment. There is no freedom. You don't have choice. You can't do your own thing. Well, that's perfectly true in a collective full of high, entropy consciousness. Low quality consciousness will make a low quality collective that will abuse people. No doubt about it. But we're not talking about that. And we're talking about something that probably doesn't exist except in small units. What we're talking about does exist here in, say, families. Not dysfunctional families, but functional families, where all the members of the family care and cooperate with each other and help each other. That forms a unit that doesn't denigrate the personal freedom of people in the family, but enhances it. Because no matter what it is you want to do, the rest of your family supports it, tries to help you get there and do it, whatever it is, you see. So you have to think about this differently. If you come from a fearful mind, dealing with a bunch of fearful people, then the word collective is a fearful thing. It is going to be abusive, and it will, restrict your freedom. But if you're talking about a bunch of high quality consciousness who are caring and cooperative, then you will have an environment that gives you many times more freedom, many times more choices than you would ever have in any other situation. Because no matter what it is you want to do, the rest of the people around you will want to support you in doing that. That's what it means to be cooperative and caring about other people, you see? So there'll be much more choice than there is now. That's the difference. And most people just can't imagine that because they are full of fear, and everybody they know is full of fear, and they say, nah, that just won't work. Well, it won't work with a bunch of people who are full of fear. They're right about that. And they don't necessarily know that people who are not full of fear can actually exist, and that's where we're headed, and that's really our point of being here. One day we will grow up as a species here to that point where we will be cooperative and caring, and when we will, this will be a wonderful place, and there will be more freedom than we can even imagine, more things that you can do and more choices. It'll be a lovely place to be when that happens. But it's going to be a while because we've got to get rid of a lot of fear first. So, yeah.
All right, we have one more question from TJ. Go ahead, TJ.
Sure. Let me pull it up really quick. So this always pops into my head whenever we're talking about things like this. So the images of a jealous and angry God never really sat right with me from the time I was young. I couldn't make any sense of why a loving or higher evolved being would ever want to be worshipped and bowed down to and have people subservient to him. So for a culture to have a religion with an angry, like jealous God, it almost sounds like the kind of thing that is exactly what the LCS wants to avoid by kind of restricting the way we move around. So without that being the case, how come it's so hard for people to get rid of this idea that there's this angry, jealous God watching over us?
Right. The reason that came about in the first place and why it's so hard to get rid of is that is a metaphor of God that resembles us. You see, we are an angry, jealous people. And if we are an angry, jealous people, and we are going to imagine an angry and jealous God. So God is made in the image of the people, made in the image of us. We make gods as metaphors in our own image. And that's why it's so hard to get away from it, because that's the way it is here. That's the way people are. And we think of God as just like us, except bigger and smarter and more powerful than us, but otherwise he's like us, you see. So God's made in the image of its makers, if you will, which is us. God's a metaphor. It's a metaphor for that power that's beyond us. It's a metaphor for the source, for the source of our reality. Well, the source of our reality is the larger consciousness system in my metaphors and in my model. I've got a name for that larger source too. I call it the larger consciousness system. And people who have come up with the angry, jealous gods, they also use that God as a metaphor for the creator, for the source, for the bigger picture other than this physical, kind of the non-physical being, and they make it to be just like them, just bigger and more powerful. So that's where that comes from, because how are you going to get a bunch of people to join your religion and put money in the offering plate when it gets passed around if God isn't going to punish them for not doing it? You see, that's part of the process of producing an organization that can live, that can go on, that has power, power in numbers. If you have a lot of people in your organization is powerful. If there's nobody in your organization, you don't have an organization and there's no power there. So if you have an organization and you want to have more numbers, you want to have people to support it, people that agree with you, because that's power, that's wealth, that's all of those things that fearful people want, then you need a lot of members. You get members by giving them something they want or by frightening them into doing what you want. Fear is a handle by which you can be manipulated. You know somebody who has fear and you understand their fear, you can manipulate them just as easy as anything. Fear is a big handle that's on our back that anybody who knows our fear can just reach in and make us dance to whatever tune they want by manipulating that fear. So we have a metaphor for our God that resembles us and that helps us keep the church full, because fear is a big motivator. And that's why it's hard to let go of that, because we are still people that are full of fear. And as long as we're people that are full of fear, we will see fearful things. Just like what I talked about, people who talk about a collective, being part of a collective would be a horrible idea. That means you wouldn't have any freedom. Those are people who only see the world through the lens of fear, because that's true. In a fearful world full of fearful people and fearful institutions, and a collective based on fear is going to be a nasty collective. It's going to restrict freedoms for the benefit of probably the few. Whoever's in charge are the ones that get all the benefits. The people at the bottom are the ones that get all the orders. So that's just the way a fearful collective is. And many people can't see anything else. To them, those two have to go together. Collective and loss of freedom and being abused all just are logically necessary, because they can't envision or see anything better, because it is what they are too. If they were in charge, they'd take advantage. If they're not in charge, they get ground up as one of the peons at the bottom. So it's just the way people are. That's the way religion is. Religion is not the same as spiritual. There's spirituality and there's religion. Now, the two of them can go together, but they're different things. A religion is a club. It's a membership. It's an organization. Organizations need material stuff. They need buildings, places to meet. They need leaders and followers and all kinds of things that don't have anything at all to do with spirituality. So once your spiritual attitudes become codified in a religion, now you have a whole bunch of other issues to deal with, like property and who's in charge and who says what's right and what's wrong and all the rest of it. As long as it's just spirituality, you don't need a leader. You don't need anybody in charge. You don't need any property. You don't need anything codified. It just is. So that's the difference. Now, you can find spirituality within religion, and there's many people within a religion who are very spiritual people, and they use that religion as a structure in which they put their spirituality, and that works fine for them. But they're really two different things. There's also a lot of people in religion who have have very little spirituality. They're just in that religion because their parents were and their grandparents were, and it's just part of their social structure and what they do. But they don't really have any sense of spirituality whatsoever. So religion and spirituality, two different things. And when you talk about the fearful God and so on, you're talking about religion. You're not talking about spirituality. That's part of an organization. That's a movement. Movements have other needs besides spirituality. They have other things. They need to pass the plate to get resources, because organizations need to be resourced. Otherwise, they'll disappear. They're not organized if they can't get resources. So they tend to do those things that provide them resources. That's true of any organization, whether it's a corporation that makes widgets. They got to find money. They got to find ways of getting funded. And that's doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to make better widgets. So that's why it's the difference between religion and spirituality.
Thanks.
Okay. All right, we'll go on to the next question from Rando. In the last 100 years, the world has gone through lots of big changes, and so much is happening right now. Do these vast and quick changes that are happening attract the interest of NPMR beings, that's non-physical reality beings? I would imagine that there would be quite a bit of interest in NPMR to see what humans are doing on planet Earth, especially in these quickly changing times.
Yeah, that's true. There's interest there just because this is a big simulator. Okay, we're in an entropy reduction simulator for educating, or I shouldn't say educating, but for evolving individuated units of consciousness. And if as this simulation changes character because of what the choices that are made by the consciousness playing the game, then the game changes. And if if the game changes here and the way things are done and the opportunities, well, that's of interest to not only the system that's running the game, but the potential players of the game. And it's an interest of those who would like the game to succeed, and of interest to those who would like the game to fail, whether you're on the rat or the anti-rat side of things. So yes, there is interest in what's going on here and how things are working and the choices that people are making. Just because it's a major simulator and a training tool in consciousness, and therefore it's of interest.
All right, and a question also from Rando is, you have mentioned that the learning accelerates over time, and the more you learn, the easier it is to learn more. What have you learned in the past? Edit this one. What have you learned in the last few years that have changed some of your understandings of the larger consciousness system?
Well, I'd have to think back how many last few years that would have to be, but I learn things all the time. And by all the time, I don't mean minute to minute, but things kind of come together and make sense. You see things a little differently than they did before. As you grow up, growing up is a long process that never ends. You see the world a little differently. I think that, in the latest things, just this tour we made around the world, just meeting a lot of different people. There was some changes in the way I view things just based on that. And a lot of times the changes aren't real specific. It's hard to say that, well, that changes this fact to that fact. Typically they're not that clear and clean. It's more like understanding grows it a little bigger. You see a little more what people are like in a bigger perspective, just because you've seen more people in different cultures in different ways. So you learn and you grow, and it's not always, you can't always put it in a pigeonhole, say, well, I learned this and then I learned that. That's more easy, at a beginning level. When you're in kindergarten, there's lots of things you can point to, right? When you're down in elementary school, you can say, oh, I learned, A, B, and C. I learned to add. I learned that, whatever, horses live in barns. You can learn all kinds of things at that level. And every day you could maybe list 5 or 6 new things that you've learned. But as you get older, it kind of comes more integrated into the whole. It's not so much separate things that you're learning as it is the whole takes on more meaning and more becomes more interesting in certain ways. Those are things that you just grow with. And now you look back over it and you can see big changes, but you don't necessarily see changes. I mentioned the traffic a little earlier, Donna, that we saw in New Delhi and that we saw in Bali. How the traffic was totally unregulated. It just was, and everybody was, a little island unto themselves, but at the same time cooperative with other people. Everybody knew that everybody else was trying to do something too. So, nobody actually ran into people. There was no road rage. You didn't find that everybody was angry with everybody else. That wasn't there at all. They were all just getting along, trying to get to where they wanted to go, and they weren't particularly upset about it. It's just the way it worked there. And I found that a very interesting study in the kind of the counterpoint of a top-down central management philosophy of life versus a bottoms-up distributed management way of life. And you see, that affects us in lots of ways. Like, take the internet. The reason that the internet is very successful and a powerful and a wonderful tool is because it's not regulated from the top down. It's not it's not set up from above with a lot of rules. Now, people would like to make it that way, but it's not. It's like the traffic in Bali. It's everybody does their own thing in their own way, and that's a distributed leadership as opposed to a centralized leadership. So we can look at things like that and say that's good as long as people can get along and cooperate and make things work. Then maybe it's better to have that distributed power structure rather than that top, undistributed, that centralized power structure. And we can think it in terms of our civil life, in terms of the internet, in terms of our private lives. So that was just one thing. Just looking at that traffic brought up to me this juxtaposition of central control versus distributive control and how it works and what the advantages and disadvantages are. And I thought about that some because it has a lot to do with consciousness and the growth. This is not about central control. Growing up is distributed function altogether, you see. And then I thought about some of my life that I live in a very structured place, and it was my life is full of rules that come from not only government but social conventions, whatever. There's all these rules, and you wonder how much do those rules actually make it easier to get along, to get around, to get through an intersection where 5 roads come together, and how much do those rules just arbitrary? They get in the way. It's just central control. Somebody who has power decides this is the way it'll be, and we all then follow the rules. So just considering that in various aspects of my life, well, that's something that happened to me just on this trip, and it was because of the traffic in Bali that I started to reconsider central control versus decentralized control in all aspects of life, and what the advantages and disadvantages are. How much control do we need from the top? You see, and I think it makes a big difference where we are. If we're a bunch of people with very low quality, and we're constantly, it's all about us, and we're very self-centered, then central control is probably the only way that we can get along with each other. All right, guys, here are the rules, follow them. You see, because if we don't have those rules imposed on us, it's just all about us, and we don't mind, hurting somebody else if it gets us ahead. Whereas if we care more about each other and we're more cooperative, we don't need this central control. It just becomes a constraint, a constriction that lowers the amount of creativity we can have, of ways that we can express ourselves. So I think we need more central control sometimes, some places, some people, some attitudes, and we need less other places. And perhaps growing up, becoming love as a culture, as a species, we're going to see a lot of this centralized control just disappear. And it won't be this collective run from a centralized control. We'll see this collective run from a distributed control. It won't be centralized in a spot. It'll be all of us because we just care about each other, sort of like the traffic at Bali. They don't have any controller that says, okay, you guys stop and you guys go. Everybody just does their best, gets along, but they look out for each other, and everybody gets through. So, yeah, things like that to answer this question. Lots of things, lots of little details in your life will cause you to reassess things to help you grow and see bigger pictures. It's just a matter of grabbing that opportunity and then making something of it. So I have those kinds of things happen to me all the time, because the more you learn, the easier it is to learn more. You see that a lot of people would look at that traffic and just say, wow, what a madhouse, and never really learn anything about the nature of reality from it. Other people might, you see. So it's just the way it is. It's easier to learn more when you've already learned something. You see connectedness of lots of things, and that learning goes on day by day, hour by hour, but it doesn't just erupt as I learned a thing like it does in kindergarten. I just got another perspective that helps me see the world a little differently. And I didn't come to any conclusions particularly. It's just up there cooking, in my head about not accepting rules just because they're there. One needs to see a bigger picture and reevaluate how we live and what we do and what we value and what we don't.